My parents kicked me out of the house on my birthday, so I took their credit card and their life was. On my 21st birthday, my parents handed me a suitcase instead of a cake. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the aroma of cinnamon rolls lingering in the air. Valerie's favorite, not mine. The oven ticked as it cooled, but the warmth did little to soften the chill radiating from my mother's eyes. "You knew the condition," Valerie said, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. "No wedding, no home." My stomach knotted. I knew this conversation might come. But not today. Not on this day. She pointed to the suitcase propped neatly against the pantry wall, its wheels angled toward the door like a silent command. I hadn't packed it. She had. Every folded corner, every zipped compartment screamed preparation. This wasn't impulsive. This was orchestrated. "I'm not going to Chloe's wedding," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Not because I hate her. Because I don't want to lie about what she's doing. What you all are letting her do." Valerie's jaw tightened. "We won't tolerate this level of disrespect anymore." I glanced at the empty breakfast table. No balloons, no card, not even a cup of coffee with my name on it. There was no sign this day meant anything except for my removal. The suitcase thudded slightly as she slid it closer to me with the toe of her heel. I turned to Stephen, my father, who stood near the sink, staring out the window at nothing in particular. "Dad?" I whispered. "You're really okay with this?" His shoulders tensed. He didn't look at me, just gave a shallow nod, then turned away completely. I didn't cry. Not yet. I gripped the suitcase handle, my fingers trembling. The guest room, the one I had moved back into during senior year, was already cleared. The closet doors were ajar, revealing hangers with no weight. My books were gone from the shelf. Even the old comforter I kept since childhood was folded in a trash bag by the back door. I paused by the hallway, hoping for something. Valerie stood with perfect posture, arms crossed, her pearls resting against a pressed blouse like a badge of honor. Her eyes didn't flinch. "You chose this," she whispered with a smile so slight it stung more than a slap. I stepped outside. The sky was gray, the kind of overcast that promised rain but never delivered. A gust of wind tangled my hair as I fumbled with my phone. No messages, no missed calls, no birthday wishes. Nothing but the cold October wind at my back. They kicked me out, but forgot to change the locks on their iCloud. The attic smelled of old insulation and cedar shavings. Dust curled in the sunlight, filtering through a single, narrow window. I dropped my suitcase near the bed. If you could call a twin mattress on milk crates a bed, and exhaled for the first time in hours. The silence was deafening, but at least it wasn't judgmental. Ethan didn't ask questions. He opened the door to the garage apartment, handed me a spare key, and said, "No rent. Just don't burn it down." Then he disappeared back downstairs, leaving me with solitude and the echo of every sentence I hadn't gotten to say. I sat cross-legged on the mattress and hugged my jacket tighter. The light was fading fast, and I hadn't eaten since morning. No text from Chloe, no apology from Stephen, not even a fake inspirational quote from Valerie. Nothing. Then I saw it. A scuffed-up iPad with a cracked corner, half buried under a pile of old scarves in my suitcase. I blinked. Valerie must have tossed it in there when packing my things. She never noticed tech that wasn't gold-plated. I tapped the screen. It flickered to life. No passcode. I connected to Ethan's Wi-Fi and watched as the device quietly resynced. I should have turned it off, should have wiped it clean. But something stopped me. The email app was already open. Valerie's inbox. I stared at it for a second. Surely it would log out any moment, but it didn't. It loaded message after message, complete with previews, attachments, and digital receipts. I scrolled. Donation to Heart Forward Foundation, $8,000. Dinner at Oceanique, $1,100. Private consultation, Dr. Hirschman, off the record. Then a thread titled, 2023 taxes, final adjustments. My stomach clenched. I opened it. Valerie Carter. Let's not declare the full amount this year. No one audits social good. Just round it off and attach the donation letter. Chloe's wedding is a better use of that money anyway. Accountant. As long as you're comfortable signing, I wouldn't advise pushing limits this far again. I blinked, rereading every word. This wasn't just tax evasion. This was arrogance in .pdf form. I began screenshotting. Each page, each attachment, each conversation. My fingers trembled, but not from cold. From clarity. I didn't know what I would do with any of it. Yet, a breeze slipped through the window frame and brushed my cheek. For the first time in years, I didn't feel entirely helpless. I whispered into the stillness. I may be broke, but they're wide open. You don't just lose a home. You lose the illusion of ever being wanted. October 6th. First day homeless. I wrote it in the margins of a half-crumpled receipt from a gas station sandwich I couldn't even afford. The pen ink bled a little from the dampness in the air, or maybe my fingers were shaking too much to notice. The sidewalk beneath me was still wet from the morning drizzle, and even the pigeons looked warmer than I felt. The wind pushed golden leaves down the sidewalk like they were in a rush to be anywhere but here. I wandered into the park near the community library. Renton's answer to silence and second chances. It was small but quiet, and the benches didn't come with judgment. I sat for a while, watching kids toss a frisbee between bare-limbed trees. None of them reminded me of me. I didn't have days like that. Birthdays were always a shared celebration with Chloe. My cake always had her name on it, too. Balloons that said, "Happy birthday, girls," in pastel pink and gold. I never got to blow out candles alone. And somehow I thought that meant I was lucky. I thought I belonged. "You've always been so independent," Valerie once said. It wasn't a compliment. I tugged my coat tighter and made my way into the library. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I breathed in the smell of old pages and worn carpet. For a few minutes, I could pretend I had a purpose. I walked aisle to aisle, dragging my fingers along book spines like I was searching for a version of myself that didn't exist yet. At the end of one row, I saw a girl sitting cross-legged near the large windows, head down, shoulders trembling. She couldn't have been more than 12. She looked up just as I passed, eyes red, and then, just like that, she bumped into my arm and bolted past without a word. Her backpack was too big for her frame. I didn't chase her. "First time seeing Lena?" a voice asked. I turned to find an older woman in a knitted vest with a name tag that read, "Patricia Volunteer." Her voice was warm but weathered, like someone who'd seen too many heartbreaks and had stopped being surprised by them. "She doesn't speak much. Comes in every week. Some kids cry loud. She cries quiet." I nodded, unsure what to say. She reached into the rolling cart beside her and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook with a torn corner. "It's used," she said. "But there's plenty of blank pages. Everyone deserves a place to write their own story." I took it slowly, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. The cover was cracked, the pages slightly yellowed. But it was mine. Outside, I sat on a bench under a maple tree and opened the first page. "If they won't remember me right," I wrote, "I'll write myself again." The words barely filled a line, but they carved something open. Not rage, not yet, but clarity, control. I pulled out the iPad again and scrolled through Valerie's old folders, careful not to breathe too loudly, as if the act itself might alert her through the ether. I paused at one labeled, "Scholarship Fund 2019. Private." Private. My thumb hovered. Somewhere behind me, the wind kicked up. A gust, sharp and sudden, scattered the leaves like whispers I hadn't asked for. I tapped the folder. They left me nothing except an open door into their world. The only light in the room came from my laptop screen. Ethan was downstairs strumming something gentle on his guitar, just enough to remind me I wasn't entirely alone. The attic creaked as the wind shifted outside. I was wrapped in a thrifted blanket and balancing the iPad on my knees, staring at a folder that had no business still being accessible. Scholarship Fund 2019. Private. Inside were spreadsheets, scanned receipts, and buried beneath 3 subfolders, a page titled Foundation Admin Credentials. I tapped. The document revealed card numbers, expiration dates, billing info still tied to the Blake family's charity. At first, I thought it was outdated. But one entry caught my eye. A recently issued card, set to expire in 2026. I copied the number. I wasn't sure why. Just curiosity. I pulled up a resale site and browsed winter coats. Found a simple navy one for $40. Nothing fancy. My fingers hovered over the Buy Now button. This was illegal. I clicked anyway. The card processed, instantly. No rejection, no fraud alert, no two-factor ping. I sat motionless as the confirmation email rolled in. Thank you for your purchase, Madison. My heart thudded. It didn't make sense. Valerie was meticulous. How had she forgotten to disconnect this? Or maybe she never expected anyone to look this deep. Never expected me to still exist. I leaned back, watching email after email from the iPad trickle into the inbox. All connected to that card. Payments to social partners. Miro. Community outreach. Donations to causes Valerie would never support in public. It wasn't charity. It was laundering. I didn't want revenge. Not really. Not yet. But what I did want was proof. So I started collecting screenshots, dates, amounts. I created folders labeled with boring names, tax drafts, misc admin. Nothing that would draw attention if she ever checked. Each click made me feel less like a victim and more like a witness. I could have bought groceries or new shoes. Maybe even booked a night somewhere with real heating. But instead, I found a site for LGBTQ youth outreach. I knew Valerie hated anything that didn't fit into her white suburban mold. I typed in a $200 donation. Her name, her foundation, her credit card. I hovered. Was this justice or just pettiness? I clicked confirm. The screen thanked Valerie Blake Carter for her generous contribution to youth empowerment. I didn't smile, but my spine straightened a little. Then the attic door creaked open. I hadn't even noticed Ethan come upstairs. He leaned on the frame, guitar still slung over one shoulder. He looked at the screen, then at me. "You're either scamming someone," he said slowly, "or saving your own damn life." They never asked if I was okay. They asked if I was useful. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and desperation. My paper cup was half full, and I was nursing it like it held answers. Outside, the rain blurred the window glass, turning headlights into streaks of yellow on gray. I pulled my coat tighter and stared at the foam, trying to pretend it was comfort. The iPad buzzed once in my backpack. I ignored it. I was back in the summer of 2020. Valerie's voice echoed even in memory. Crisp, clean, always one octave too polite. Let's run it again, slower this time. We were at the family's vacation home on the coast. Warm breeze, blue hydrangeas, an ocean view that somehow felt like a cage. Chloe, sit up straighter. And smile. Madison, read it with more energy, darling. If your tone is flat, the interviewer will think she's flat. I sat across from Chloe on the patio, a script in my hands. It was her mock interview for the Ivy League application, but I had written the responses. Her answers, her story, my delivery. Chloe laughed awkwardly. It's weird reading this like I actually volunteered at the clinic. I only went once. Valerie smiled without humor. No one checks. What matters is tone. Later, in my room, I drafted her college essay. Valerie stood behind me, sipping something fizzy and cold. You're gifted with words, Madison. It's your strength. Use it for the family. When do I get to use it for me? I'd asked quietly. She didn't answer, just left a folded brochure on my bed. If you finish this by Friday, we'll talk about that writing program in New York. No promises. She never mentioned it again. I took another sip of bitter coffee. Present day. The plastic table wobbled when I shifted. No brochure, no exposure. Just an old iPad in my bag and a $3 caffeine drip I didn't pay for myself. The barista called someone's name. I barely noticed. I opened my phone out of habit and scrolled without thinking, until a photo stopped me. Chloe, in a red cocktail dress, holding a framed plaque. Her caption read, "Honored to accept the Family Philanthropy Award on behalf of the Blake Foundation. Grateful, Jar Legacy, Shark Giving Back." The award sat on a podium engraved with integrity, leadership, service. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I remembered writing that tagline for Valerie during a dinner fundraiser years ago. I was 16. My chest burned, but it wasn't anger this time. It was exposure. The raw, sharp kind that comes when light hits something that's been buried too long. They made Chloe their golden child. They made me her shadow. And every ounce of polish in their legacy had my fingerprints on it. I opened the notebook from the library, flipped past yesterday's words, and wrote something new. You built that empire on my silence. Time to speak. Sometimes the people who hurt you wear your smile. I hadn't planned on going to the workshop. The flyer was half torn and taped crookedly to the side of a bulletin board in the library. Expressive storytelling through visual form, open to all. I was in the building already, looking for warmth and maybe a bathroom. But something about the words open to all made me pause. It was early evening when I walked through the door of the art department hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Inside the studio, the smell of graphite and old paint clung to the air. Maybe I was curious, or maybe I just didn't want to go back to Ethan's attic yet. There were maybe 10 people seated around folding tables, blank sheets in front of them. A tall, soft-spoken professor explained the assignment. Draw what home feels like, not what it looks like, what it feels like. I didn't have to think long. In front of me, I sketched a heavy, rusted padlock, jagged edges, a chain wrapped around something unseen. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a familiar frame. Small, hunched over, sleeves pulled down past her wrists. Lena. She hadn't seen me yet. She was staring at her paper like it was taunting her. No pencil marks, just silence. Then her shoulders rose and stiffened. The professor came by and gently tapped her desk. Anything you want to express, Lena? She didn't move. The professor nodded once and walked on. I shifted my seat slightly, just enough to bridge the gap. You can copy mine, I whispered. She looked up sharply. Recognition flickered. It's just a locked door anyway, I added. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. Instead, she slowly picked up her pencil and began to mimic the outline I'd drawn. Loose, not exact. But the shape was familiar. We didn't talk for a while. We didn't need to. As the session wrapped up, I gathered my things and reached for my coat when her voice drifted to me. So soft, I almost missed it. I used to live in a house just like yours, Lena said, until they decided I was the wrong kind of daughter. I turned. Her eyes were distant but steady. She wasn't ashamed. She was just tired. Who? I asked gently. She shook her head. Doesn't matter. I'm not their problem anymore. She started walking toward the exit. I didn't follow. I just watched her go. Back in the hallway, I pulled out the iPad, checking Valerie's inbox. Mostly the usual. Updates from board members, receipts for fundraisers, tax receipt PDFs. Then a new notification appeared at the top. Subject: Security alert. New login detected device: MacBook Pro. Location: Chicago, Illinois. Accessed portal: Blake Foundation, donation management. My stomach dropped. Someone else was in the system. When you're invisible long enough, no one notices when you start watching. The printer hummed steadily in the corner of Ethan's garage, feeding sheet after sheet onto the floor like falling leaves. It was just past midnight. The space smelled like old wood, motor oil, and toner ink. I was cross-legged on a blanket, surrounded by stacks of paperwork I hadn't asked to find, but couldn't stop digging through. I had been organizing the files from the iPad, trying to make sense of what I'd found so far. Tax forms, donation logs, financial statements riddled with numbers I didn't understand, but names I did. One folder labeled Archived Filings, 2019 caught my attention. There it was, the Madison Blake Fund. At first, I didn't react. The name didn't feel real, like seeing your reflection in a window you weren't standing near. I printed it. 6 pages. Page 5 held the signature line. Signed, Madison A. Blake, Executive Representative. The scrawl was clean, confident, stylized with a loop I never used. It wasn't mine. My breath stuck in my throat. I searched through my bag, pulled out the notebook from the library, and scrawled my real signature on the last page. Not even close. I flipped through more documents, hands shaking. My name was everywhere. On letters to donors, on a statement claiming travel reimbursement, on a check authorization for over $10,000. She made me a ghost CEO, not just for show, but to protect herself. Any audit would flag my name, not hers. Any fraud claim? Any tax evasion? It would trace back to Madison Blake, the perfect shadow daughter who never asked questions and always did as told. She made me the face of her fraud, and I didn't even know. I whispered, voice dry. I stared at the fake signature again, memorizing the lines. My phone buzzed. One new email, auto-forwarded from Valerie's account. Subject, IRS audit probabilities are still low, right? 2, Brenner at csglegalgroup.com. There it was. The paper shield they built was cracking. They just didn't know I was watching from the inside now. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Timeline of Evidence. The first file, Signature Fraud, 2019. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war. Some people are quiet because they're scared, others because they've seen too much. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a couple of students hunched over laptops and a barista wiping down tables with the kind of tired efficiency that comes from knowing no one ever says thank you. Rain tapped on the windows in a constant, lulling rhythm, blurring the view of the campus across the street. Lena sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of chamomile tea. She hadn't taken a sip. We hadn't planned this, just walked out of the workshop at the same time and found ourselves drifting toward the same place. I wasn't sure she'd stay once we sat down, but she hadn't moved. I didn't mean to startle you back there, I said softly, stirring my coffee though the sugar had long dissolved. You didn't, she replied, eyes fixed on the steam. Just wasn't ready. I nodded. The silence between us didn't feel heavy, just fragile, like glass set on a too warm surface. Eventually, she spoke. They sent me to a center outside Olympia, said it was for troubled girls, said I needed help. Her voice was flat, like she'd rehearsed this story and shaved it of all its emotion. Was it? I didn't finish the question. It didn't need to be asked. She looked up. Her eyes were calm but distant. I kissed a girl at church camp. She kissed me back. Her parents found the texts. Mine made the call. A waiter passed by, glanced at us, and then away again. Whatever flicker of curiosity he felt died beneath his customer service smile. I was gone for 9 months. Lena continued. We had to memorize verses, had to confess every day, had to smile when we hurt. Do they still talk to you? I asked. We live 15 minutes apart. Haven't spoken in 2 years. She said it without bitterness. Just fact. I told her my story in return. About the birthday eviction, the suitcase instead of a cake. About being useful but never enough. About Chloe, the award-winning sister who never knew what it cost to be her. Lena smiled. Barely. They always need one of us to be the mirror, she said, so they can see themselves better. We both laughed then. It was soft and short, but real. She finally sipped her tea. The rain hadn't let up. They said I brought shame, Lena murmured, watching the drops race each other down the window. But I only ever brought truth. We let that hang in the air, unchallenged. I reached for my coat, not ready to go, but knowing we couldn't stay forever. Then Lena leaned forward, her voice almost a whisper. If you could return everything they took, would you? I looked at her, and I didn't answer. Not yet. No one notices a thief when she wears the uniform of a daughter. The computer lab in the university library was a sterile sort of quiet. White fluorescents humming, keyboards clacking softly in the distance. Most students had left hours ago, chased out by midterm fatigue or the lure of warmer blankets. But I stayed, tucked into the back row, the only light coming from the screen in front of me and the flicker of a blinking cursor. Lena sat nearby, pretending to scroll through her phone. She wasn't pretending well. Last chance to back out, she whispered. I already walked off that ledge, I replied, opening the final folder of PDFs I had scanned earlier. Tax statements, donor rosters, shell program write-ups with glowing descriptions and zero accountability. The last one was titled, Women in Power, Q2 Success Summary. No board members listed, no proof of events, just glamour photos and stock quotes. I clicked on the IRS tip submission portal. Anonymous? Yes. Relevant documents attached? Yes. Brief description of suspected fraud? I typed, repeated misrepresentation of charitable activity for tax avoidance. Operating under the name Madison Blake Fund and Women in Power Foundation. Please investigate the attached documents for fabricated program data and forged signatories. I hit send. The upload bar crawled across the screen, slow as syrup. Beside me, Lena kept watch. At one point, someone entered the lab, saw us, and left. That was our world now. On edge, always watching. I returned to the iPad. Valerie's old login credentials were still stored. Out of curiosity, or maybe instinct, I tried logging into the Women in Power admin dashboard. Same email, same password. She hadn't changed it. A part of me flinched at how careless she'd been. Another part felt sick at how easy this had all been from the start. Inside, I found folders labeled Grant Reports, Expense Receipts, and one ominously titled Draft Programs Not Public. They detailed fake seminars, doctored attendance numbers, reimbursement requests for non-existent travel. Names of partner speakers I knew for a fact were in different countries during those months. One file read, Women in Leadership, Spokane, 15 attendees with a receipt for $3,800 in catering. I checked the date. That was the week Valerie was in Hawaii. I downloaded everything. On a separate browser tab, I scheduled 3 delayed email blasts, each loaded with evidence, set to be sent to 3 independent local journalists, one from the Puget Ledger, one from Civic Eye, and one from a personal blog run by an ex-IRS auditor. Delivery time, 3 weeks from tonight. Just enough time to be far, far away. Lena leaned over my shoulder. What if they find you? They will, I said, but they won't be able to. As I shut the laptop and gathered my bag, my phone buzzed. A single text. From Valerie. To Stephen. We need to talk. I think someone's inside our files. The dominoes had started to fall. Justice doesn't knock. It sends letters. The Carter kitchen was a glossy war zone. Marble counters cluttered with half-drunk coffee mugs, a tablet blinking with unopened notifications, and the rustle of Sunday's untouched paper strewn across the island. Valerie stood stiff, the certified envelope still in her hand. Her manicured fingers trembled as she slid a butter knife under the seal. Stephen hovered by the fridge, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The air was heavy with anticipation, like the seconds before a courtroom verdict. Valerie unfolded the letter. Her eyes darted across lines like a gambler checking a losing hand. The Internal Revenue Service is initiating a formal audit of the Blake Family Foundation and associated philanthropic accounts. fiscal years 2019 through 2023. She sat down slowly, the letter slipping from her fingers. What the hell is this? Stephen barked, snatching it up. An audit? After all our precautions? I don't understand, Valerie said quietly. We file quarterly. We donate to vetted programs. We've done everything above board. Don't. Stephen cut her off. Don't insult me with that sanctimonious tone. Who did you piss off? Was it Linda? You know she's still bitter about being pushed out. Valerie didn't answer. She stood and walked to the counter, flipping open her laptop. Notifications bloomed across the screen. Flagged emails, bounced messages, storage warnings. She opened her inbox and began deleting. The clatter of keys echoed like panic. Upstairs, Chloe wandered in, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, makeup halfway done. What's going on? I can hear you two from the driveway, she said, pouring herself a coffee. Stephen shot her a look. Nothing that concerns you. Valerie didn't look up. It's the foundation. Someone reported us. The IRS wants a full audit. Chloe blinked. So, what? They'll just look and leave. We haven't done anything wrong, right? Neither parent responded. Well, I'm not getting dragged into it, Chloe muttered, walking out with her mug. Some people can't stand to see others happy, she added, almost as an afterthought, thumb tapping her phone screen as she disappeared. Valerie's voice broke the silence. If Madison had anything to do with this? Stephen exhaled sharply. She wouldn't have the guts, and she has no proof. She's just a bitter girl with no direction. Valerie didn't reply. She was already digging through her archived folders, erasing names, scrubbing timestamps. The kitchen, once a curated scene for magazine shoots and charity brunches, now hummed with dread. Upstairs, Chloe rifled through an old drawer in her childhood vanity, looking for her favorite lip balm. Her fingers brushed something hard and rectangular. She pulled it out. A USB. It was labeled in neat, almost childish handwriting. Scholarship Assets Backup M. She turned it over in her hand, puzzled. Madison's initial. Madison's drawer. Madison's past. Downstairs, no one heard the faint click as Chloe slipped the drive into her tote bag. She taught me to keep my head down. I used that to stay invisible while I aimed. The only light in Ethan's garage came from two screens. One laptop, one secondhand tablet. A small heater in the corner hummed faintly, barely warming the stacked walls of paper, receipts, and printed emails. Outside, the night pressed against the windows like a thick curtain. Madison leaned over her keyboard, her eyes reflecting lines of code and spreadsheet entries. Her fingers hovered, not hesitating, just calculating. Across from her, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, tracing a cable to a small USB dongle she'd attached hours earlier. That should catch screen activity and keystrokes. Not that it'll get everything, but enough. You said she still uses the same cloud account? Madison nodded. The one she forgot to log out of. Valerie Blake, queen of the digital jungle, dethroned by a borrowed iPad. Lena smiled, tight-lipped. Even predators forget to look behind them. On the screen, data began trickling in. Madison navigated to the Women in Power Fund account. The interface was polished. Too polished. It advertised mentorship programs, scholarships, leadership retreats. All hollow. What are you looking for again? Lena asked. A pattern. Madison murmured. She's moving money. Same time every week. Always labeled internal realignment or budget migration. Euphemisms. But the destination never changes. She clicked open a set of logs. Transfers. All routed to a holding account tied to a personal bank. One name kept appearing on the approvals. Stephen Blake. Madison read aloud. She opened the files. 14 PDFs, each one stamped with a digital signature bearing her father's name. The same father who barely looked her in the eye the day she left. They always made me sit behind Chloe at every event, Madison said softly, not looking away from the screen. She stood on stage. I held her cue cards. Valerie once said I was just background decoration. Lena didn't answer. She didn't have to. I stopped asking to be seen, Madison added, but they forgot invisible doesn't mean blind. She selected the files, compressed them, and encrypted the folder. Outside, the wind rattled loose leaves against the garage door like restless fingers tapping. Flashback images drifted in and out of her mind. Chloe laughing with friends while Madison sat behind a catering table. Chloe dismissing her with a wave. Valerie clapping louder for Chloe's every success. Now the click of a mouse echoed louder than any applause. "What now?" Ethan asked, appearing in the doorway with a cup of tea. He looked at the monitors, then at her. "You've got their lies, their paper trail. So what's next? Burn them or bury them?" Madison stared at the folder on her desktop. The label read, "Authorization Records Confidential Zip." She closed the lid of the laptop and stood slowly. "Neither," she said. "I'm mailing them to someone I used to trust." No more hiding. No more silence. The girl in the background had stepped into the frame. Last time they made me leave. This time I came with a +1. The truth. Golden light bled across rows of manicured grapevines, catching on crystal goblets and white orchids arranged in curated imperfection. Chloe's wedding, again, was everything the local lifestyle magazines had promised. A glossy affair of socialites and sponsors, brand ambassadors and legacy donors. Cameras clicked like a heartbeat, and not a speck of dust marred the velvet aisle runners. At the edge of the estate, near the staff parking area, I waited in a blue windbreaker and worn boots, my hair pulled into a low ponytail. Unremarkable. Practically invisible. Just how they'd trained me. Rachel arrived late, as expected, coffee in hand, press pass swinging from her neck, and a furrow between her brows as if the weight of the world had settled there. She still walked like she did in high school. Fast, focused, ready to challenge every opinion in the room. We hadn't spoken in years. Debate club had ended with college decisions and mutual ghosting. But I remembered something about Rachel. She had a memory like a steel trap and a moral compass that didn't sway with applause. "Madison Blake?" she asked, one eyebrow raised as she stopped in front of me. "Didn't expect the reunion invite to come with this." I handed her the manila envelope. "You'll want to see it before the reception speeches start." She took it with the wariness of someone expecting a prank. Opened it. Flipped through. Emails, transfer logs, account summaries, tax documents. The USB was tucked in the middle, labeled, "Backups, unedited." Then she paused. "Tax return, 2019. Filed by Madison Blake. Authorized by Stephen Blake. Oversight, Valerie Blake." Rachel blinked. "You were the legal face?" I nodded. I didn't even know until 3 weeks ago. She kept flipping. A grainy printout of an internal email. "Don't declare the full amount this year. It qualifies as social advocacy." Photos of charity events that never happened. Catering receipts for meals never served. Reimbursement for travel Valerie never took. Rachel's fingers trembled, just slightly. "If even half of this is true, your family's not just toxic. They're illegal." A cheer erupted from the vineyard. The ceremony must have ended. I could hear clapping, the celebrant's voice rising over the speakers, Chloe's giggle echoing against stone columns. "She still doesn't know," I said quietly. "Not the full story." Rachel looked up. "She will." We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers. I handed her everything I had and walked away, leaving her in the shadow of a building wrapped in ivy and lies. Across the estate, Valerie stood near the head table, champagne flute in hand, her smile tight as she watched Chloe dance with her new husband. Stephen leaned over her shoulder, checking something on his phone. And then Valerie's screen lit up. Text message. "We need to talk. Someone named Rachel is asking questions." Her smile didn't break, but her grip on the glass did. A single crack spidered down the stem. They always smile for the cameras, but a smile can't survive an audit. The kitchen was immaculate, always was. A sunbeam split through the plantation shutters and fell across the marble island, catching the faintest smear of last night's raspberry glaze on a porcelain saucer. Chloe sat cross-legged on the counter stool, her phone frozen in her hand, untouched latte cooling beside her. The headline on her screen was unmistakable: The Philanthropy Shell Game, Inside the Blake Foundation, by Rachel C. Tran, Seattle Watch. A subheading followed in smaller type: Anonymous whistleblower exposes years of fabricated financial filings, tax shelters, and misused nonprofit funds, linked directly to Madison Blake. She hadn't even scrolled yet. The headline alone took the air from the room. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Valerie swept in wearing a cashmere robe, phone to her ear, voice taut with civility turned venom. No, we're not making any statements. The story is baseless, pure gossip. If your board so much as hesitates, we'll have legal draft a clarification. Yes. Goodbye. She hung up and tossed the phone on the counter. Chloe didn't look up. You've seen it. Of course I've seen it. Valerie's voice sliced the quiet. The damn article dropped at 5 a.m., like they planned to catch us off guard. Stephen entered from the back patio, a golf towel still over his shoulder. The phones won't stop ringing. Board members, journalists, what the hell did she do? Chloe finally scrolled. A photo filled the screen, an excerpt from a tax document. Her sister's name was circled in red. Authorized Representative, Madison Blake. Dated, signed, and filed in 2019. She looked up. Why is Maddie's name on this? Wasn't she in school? Valerie snatched the phone from her hand. You are not to comment. You are not to post. You are not to engage. I wasn't going to. Chloe replied quietly. Stephen leaned against the counter, his voice lower. Why now? Madison's been gone for a month. Why her name? Why these documents? Valerie's hand trembled. Someone's targeting us. They got to her, spun her into something she isn't. She's fragile, vindictive. She's detailed, Chloe said under her breath. What was that? Valerie snapped. Chloe stood, brushing crumbs from her lap. Nothing. Valerie's eyes narrowed. She was nothing. Just a placeholder, a support act. We built everything without her. Silence fell like a guillotine. Stephen looked away. Even the birds outside seemed to go quiet. Chloe moved slowly to the sink, rinsing her hands just to feel grounded. Her voice was low, but it cut cleaner than any scream. If that's true, why does she know everything? Valerie's lips parted, but no words came. The article was still open on the counter, still being read, still being shared. And the first crack had split through their perfect image, too deep to hide with a smile. Some messages don't need a sender. The truth speaks loud enough. The padded envelope was resting on Chloe's doormat when she returned from a late dinner. No stamps, no return address, just her name in plain black ink. The kind of envelope that felt too quiet to be harmless. Inside her apartment, she set it down on the kitchen counter, hesitant. She wasn't used to things arriving without being filtered by PR agents or assistants. Even wedding gifts had tracking numbers. She opened it carefully. A folded stack of paper, scans, printouts. On top, a photocopy of a 2019 tax filing. At the bottom, in familiar ink, a name she hadn't seen in weeks. Madison Blake, authorized signatory. Chloe blinked, holding the page closer. It wasn't just a form. It was dated, filed, and marked as approved. But the signature wasn't Madison's. It was cleaner, loopier, Valerie's writing imitating her daughter's name. Beneath the documents was a single handwritten note on lined paper. You deserve to know. You always did. M, no address, no explanation. Just wait. Chloe stood still, pages fluttering slightly in the kitchen breeze. Her phone buzzed on the counter, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she drifted into a memory. Two little girls in matching pink dresses twirling in their backyard under spring sunlight. Chloe had slipped in the mud. Madison had laughed and followed. Both had tumbled, giggling, until Valerie appeared in a blur of fury. "Do you know how much that dress cost?" A slap. Madison's cheek red. Chloe frozen in place. Later that day, they'd hidden under the guest bed together. Chloe had whispered, "I'm sorry." Madison had only said, "It's okay. I'm used to it." They hugged in the dark. Chloe snapped back to the present and looked down at the forged signature again. She picked up the note, turned it over. Nothing. No second page. Just truth delivered without permission. She was never the enemy, Chloe whispered. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She opened her contacts. Madison's name hadn't been deleted, just buried under dozens of new ones. She tapped it. The number still had no profile picture. "Chloe, I want to talk. I don't know if this is still your number, but I want to talk." She didn't press send immediately, but her thumb trembled above the screen, because part of her already knew. Madison was the only one who had ever told her the truth without expecting applause. They crafted a perfect daughter. Now they'll meet the real one. The auditorium hummed with the quiet anticipation of academic civility. Rows of suits and blazers, the occasional clicking of laptop keys, and a few scattered reporters nestled in the back corners. The university's annual symposium on nonprofit ethics had always been a low-risk event. Predictable, safe. Until today. Chloe stood at the podium under a warm spotlight, her breath even, her speech rehearsed. She wore ivory, elegant, sharp, like the kind of woman her mother had spent 2 decades sculpting from ambition and press releases. "The cornerstone of ethical giving," she began, "is not just how we collect, but how we account." Behind her, the screen glowed with a slide deck. Graphs, acronyms. A quote from her mother dated 2021. "Philanthropy is a promise to do better than the system." The crowd nodded politely. Next slide. A chart showing donor growth over 5 years. A logo. The Blake Foundation. Then, too quickly, an image of a 2019 tax form. Her breath caught. Line 18. Representative. Madison Blake. The name hovered there like a ghost, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. From the far back of the auditorium, in the shadows behind the last row of seats, someone shifted slightly. Chloe looked past the floodlights and met her sister's eyes. Madison didn't move. She stood with her hands by her sides, hair tied back, clothes plain. No applause, no accusation. Just watching. Valerie sat near the front, perfectly composed. Her face unreadable, but her grip on the program pamphlet had whitened her knuckles. Chloe looked back at the screen. The stamp on the form had a date. The signature was clear. The implication was louder than any mic. She took a breath. "There's something," she said, her voice steady. "We need to address." The moderator, Professor Ellis, stirred slightly, unsure if this was scripted. Chloe didn't wait. "Many of you know me as a representative of the Blake Foundation, but what most of you don't know is that the foundation lists 2 daughters. Gasps weren't loud, but they were real. I believe Madison Blake's name was used without her consent," Chloe said, scanning the crowd, her gaze deliberately bypassing Valerie. "And I believe, if we care about ethics at all, she deserves a voice." Valerie rose to her feet. Her heels clicked like gunshots against the marble floor. She didn't speak, didn't argue. Just turned and walked down the aisle, past donors, professors, and former interns who now whispered like bees disturbed in their hive. "Is she the second daughter?" someone asked in a hush. "I thought she was gone." "She looks just like—" Madison remained still. She hadn't come for drama. She hadn't come to scream. She had come so they could see her, so they could stop pretending she was a footnote. And this time, someone else, someone shaped by the same house, the same lies, had spoken first. "Families don't fall apart in courtrooms. They fracture at dinner tables." The Blake family dining room had always felt like a showroom. Long mahogany table, tapered candles no one ever lit, and chairs that creaked only when someone dared to speak out of turn. Tonight, the candles were lit. The table was set for 4, and for the first time in years, Madison had a seat. She sat across from Chloe, who had sent the invitation with a single sentence. "We need to clear things up, face to face." Valerie, at the head of the table, smiled like a porcelain doll. Her lipstick didn't shift, but the corners of her eyes betrayed the tension. Stephen poured wine. He hadn't said much since Madison walked through the door. Just a nod. Not quite welcome, just acknowledgement. The first few minutes were all silverware and silence. Lamb roast, roasted carrots, organic likely. No one was hungry. "So," Valerie finally said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin she hadn't used. "How have you been surviving these days, Madison?" "I assume Ethan's garage is still standing?" Madison didn't rise to the bait. Chloe did. "Mom?" Valerie tilted her head. "I'm just making conversation." Stephen cleared his throat. "Let's get to it." Everyone looked at him. He never led the conversation. He turned to Madison. "What are you going to do with the documents?" Madison met his gaze without blinking. "Nothing." A beat passed. She added, "Already done." Valerie's knife paused mid-slice. "Excuse me?" Madison reached into her coat pocket and slid a folded paper across the table. A copy of the forged power of attorney. Stephen's signature, crisp and undeniable. "I wasn't even old enough to vote," she said, "but apparently I authorized major transfers from the foundation." Chloe spoke next, calm and clear. "I have a copy too. I've already shared it with legal counsel." Valerie's wineglass clinked against her plate. Her hand trembled slightly. "I have the right," Chloe continued. "It's my name on the board too." The air in the room changed. Stephen leaned back, lips tight. Valerie's jaw tightened. She reached for her glass again. Her hand twitched. "You two think you're clever," she said, voice suddenly brittle. "Like this is some kind of game." "No," Madison said. "This is accountability." Clink. The wineglass slipped from Valerie's hand and exploded on the hardwood floor. Everyone froze. Red wine pooled like blood at her heels. She stood, eyes wide, not at Madison, but at Chloe. "I should have never let you be born," she spat, voice shaking. The words landed like a slap across the table. Chloe flinched. Stephen's head dropped. Madison didn't react. She just watched. Chloe stood slowly. Her hands didn't tremble. "From today on," she said, her voice steady, "I stand by Madison." Valerie opened her mouth to argue, but there was no sound. The candlelight flickered. The wine spread. And for the first time, the house fell completely silent. In a house built on secrets, every word becomes a weapon. The morning light spilled through the cracked garage windows, dust motes flickering like old film. Madison sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, the tiny black recording device lying on the table beside her like a coiled snake finally ready to strike. Ethan stood over her shoulder, arms crossed, silent. Lena, tapping away at her own computer, whispered, "Okay, ready when you are." Madison pressed play. Valerie's voice came through, crisp, icy, unmistakable. "I should have never let you be born." Even in the sterile acoustics of the garage, it made everyone flinch. The rest of the dinner unfolded. Stephen's question, Chloe's declaration, the sound of a glass shattering, clear as a confession. Ethan leaned back, exhaling. "Jesus." "They used me as their shadow," Madison said quietly. "Now I'm their mirror." Lena zipped the audio file, encrypted it, and dropped it into a secure folder. She pulled up Rachel's contact and sent the link via Dropbox with a single subject line. "Dinner at the Blakes, full audio." Rachel's reply came within minutes. "Got it. This changes everything. Publishing with the next installment. Stay ready." Madison nodded to herself. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. A kind of honesty no one could spin, no press statement could dilute. Just facts, just voices, just the truth. Her phone vibrated. Rachel. Voicemail. Just spoke with someone inside the IRS office. They've escalated your case to criminal investigation. That means subpoenas, depositions. This is going to hit hard. Madison didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just closed her laptop, stood up, and took a deep breath. Her phone buzzed again. Chloe. Mom just called the lawyer. They're going to turn the tide. Are you ready? Madison stared at the message. The cursor blinked in the reply box like a heartbeat waiting to speak. It only takes one truth to shatter a perfect lie. The sun had barely risen when the story broke. Madison sat on Ethan's old couch, blanket pulled to her chest, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. Lena was curled beside her, barely breathing. Ethan hovered near the kitchen island, phone forgotten on the counter. On the TV, Rachel's face filled the screen. Measured, precise, composed. And this morning, we obtained an exclusive recording that appears to capture Valerie Blake, head of the Women in Power Foundation, verbally denouncing her own daughter and referencing forged documentation used in multiple nonprofit filings. This comes amid new IRS scrutiny into the Blake Foundation's finances dating back 4 years. The screen cut to a blurred transcript overlay. Valerie's voice crystal clear. I should have never let you be born. Lena muttered, That's it. Ethan just said, Damn. Madison didn't move. The broadcast shifted to live footage of the Blake estate. Camera crews gathering, reporters shouting questions into a closed gate. Then Rachel reappeared. Sources confirm that both Valerie and her husband, Stephen Blake, have been temporarily suspended from their executive roles in Women in Power, pending full investigation. IRS officials also confirmed that a criminal inquiry is underway. The segment faded into a press conference. At first, it looked like nothing. Then Chloe Blake stepped onto the podium. She wore a black blazer and no jewelry. No branding, no handlers. My name is Chloe Blake, she said into the silence, and I have something to say. The microphones leaned toward her like a forest of open ears. I was raised to believe that family comes first, that loyalty was everything, that silence was safety. But the truth matters more than silence. Madison Blake is not just a name on a tax form. She is not a ghost in our household records. She is my sister. In the garage, Madison's breath caught. Chloe inhaled deeply, then finished. And I believe her. That was it. No speech, no dramatics. Just truth. Madison dropped the coffee cup. It didn't break, but her composure did. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Ethan put a hand on her back. Lena gripped her arm, whispering, She said it. She said it for the world. The television screen blinked. A new message appeared on Madison's phone. From Julia, attorney. You may be called as a witness. Stay reachable. This is just beginning. Madison wiped her face. The tears didn't matter anymore. She wasn't hiding. Not now. Not ever again. In court, facts speak, but faces still lie. Outside the King County Courthouse, the crowd had already gathered. Reporters, photographers, curious strangers clutching smartphones. Flashbulbs snapped in slow rhythm as Valerie Blake stepped out of a black sedan, chin high, sunglasses pressed firmly over her eyes, fingers stiffly locked with Stephen's. Her designer coat flapped like a cape in the breeze, but the strain around her mouth betrayed the myth. Inside, the courtroom was modern and sterile. Glass walls, steel frames, an American flag hanging motionless behind the judge's bench. Madison sat quietly near the front, hands clasped together on her lap. No tears, no visible fury, just presence. Rachel stood along the press line in the gallery, her pen ready. Madison was called. She stood, walked to the witness box, and took her oath with the steadiness of someone who had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. Ms. Blake, the prosecutor began, Can you confirm that this is your name on the 2019 tax documents for the Blake Foundation? Madison looked at the screen. Her name was there. Her handwriting was not. Yes, she said clearly. That is my name, but I did not sign it. I never even saw these documents until recently. Murmurs ran through the courtroom. Valerie sat motionless, staring. And what do you hope comes out of these proceedings? The lawyer asked. Madison didn't hesitate. Not punishment, just truth. No one deserves to be erased, not even for a greater good. I don't want anyone to go to jail. I just want the truth to stand. Stephen shifted uncomfortably at the defense table. His lawyer leaned in, whispering fast. Then the recording played. Valerie's voice echoed across the courtroom. I should have never let you be born. Gasps, flinches. Reporters scribbled like mad. Stephen took the stand next, trying to steer the narrative. I trusted our finance team. If there were irregularities, they happened below my level. But then came the second audio clip. Stephen authorizing a transfer with a forged power of attorney. Silence followed. Finally, Chloe stood. She wasn't asked to. She wasn't sworn in. She simply stepped forward, placed a hand on the wood railing, and said, We were wrong. I was wrong. Madison wasn't absent. We chose not to see her. But I see her now. Even the judge paused before responding. I'm ordering a formal criminal investigation into the misappropriation of funds, the judge declared. But I'm also ordering an independent audit of the Blake Foundation and granting Ms. Madison Blake the right to serve as advisory liaison to oversee the restructuring process. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Madison exhaled, eyes trained forward. As people began to rise as reporters rushed out to break the story, Valerie stood. She walked to Madison. Not close, but near enough to speak. Her voice was barely audible. You win, she whispered, but you're still my daughter. Madison met her eyes. This time she didn't look away. They said I was a mistake. Turns out I was a mirror. The folding chairs in the Renton Public Library's community room creaked softly as students shuffled in, jackets damp from the drizzle outside. The windows were fogged at the corners, blurred outlines of October leaves fluttering beyond the glass. Madison stood at the front of the room, not behind a podium, not holding a script, just a single note card in her palm and her voice steady. A sign printed on white foam board leaned against the easel beside her. Transparent futures, telling the truth, together. Chloe sat in the front row, not at the center, not flanked by admirers. Just another attendee, notebook in hand. Her posture quiet, respectful. Lena and Ethan slipped into the back, leaning slightly against the wall, nodding when Madison caught their eyes. She began. When I was younger, I thought invisibility was a curse, Madison said. It meant you didn't matter. You weren't enough. And if you disappeared, no one would notice. The students leaned in. But over time, I realized being invisible also meant I could see things. I could listen. I could learn. And eventually, I used that silence to build something louder. The screen behind her lit up with images, scanned documents, anonymous emails, protest art from Lena, an old photo of Chloe holding Madison's hand in a faded summer dress. The students didn't gasp or clap. They just watched, eyes wide, listening, absorbing. Invisibility became a power, Madison said, not because it erased me, but because it gave me the freedom to define myself. When the Q&A opened, a girl in the second row, maybe 16, raised her hand. Aren't you mad at them anymore? She asked. Madison smiled, not bitterly, not with performance, just a soft breath of truth. I'm not mad at them anymore, she said. I just won't let them write me back. There was a quiet stillness in the room after that, the kind that holds. Afterward, when the students had trickled out and the chairs stood empty again, Madison returned to her canvas tote and pulled out a small wooden box. Its lid was carved with stars. Inside, folded neatly, was a letter. She hadn't read it in weeks. Hadn't needed to. The paper was creased, worn, written on the night she turned 21. The night she was handed a suitcase instead of a cake. She opened it. Just once more. I don't know where I'll sleep tomorrow. I don't know if you'll ever say my name without bitterness. But I exist. And I won't disappear just to keep your image clean. Madison folded the letter back and slid it into the box. Closed the lid. Locked it. This version of me no longer needs to be read, she whispered. She walked to the mirror mounted beside the community room's exit. A basic thing. Metal frame, slightly tarnished, fluorescent light above casting a soft glow. Madison looked at herself. No costume. No forced smile. Just her. And for the first time, the reflection didn't scare her. She smiled.